while you're having really big feelings. So my hope is that everyone who watches our show is already kind of thinking about who's on my team. If I felt really sick, is there somebody I could call that would come get me and take me to the hospital? Because I don't want to go by myself. If I couldn't manage my household, is there someone I would trust who would let the maid in and make sure that everything was done properly and then pay the maid when the maid leaves so that when I come home from the hospital, the house is clean? It's like thinking about your own logistics and your own preferences is really what the estate planning process is all about.
Did you plan for this, or did you miss when life demands answers you can't dismiss? Will you be ready when the trumpet blows? Do you have the blueprint for life's unknowns?
Good morning.
Hi.
We've had quite a few days, haven't we? And we're excited.
Yeah, life is good.
A lot of planned fans.
Yes, I'm so grateful for all of them too, for signing up. Thank you so much for subscribing. We really appreciate
Click
you
below
so much.
Or above, whichever one it is. Just look and do it.
Planforthis.com. So I've got a story. It's sad, but it will learn so much from this one. Any parent would want to leave a legacy for their children, but life is unpredictable and it can take those children too soon, as was the case for Debbie Reynolds and her daughter, Carrie Fisher. According to NBC News, Debbie Reynolds had everything prepared to celebrate Christmas 2016 with her family when her daughter, actress Carrie Fisher, suffered a heart attack aboard a flight on December 23rd. Fisher died 4 days later on December 27th. Her mother, Debbie Reynolds, passed away the following day from a stroke. Debbie's son, Todd Fisher, blamed heartbreak for his mother's death. Sue Cameron, Reynolds' close friend, recalled that tragic holiday season, telling People magazine that the 84-year-old Singin' in the Rain actress loved Christmas so much that she kept a tree up all year and had already planned the menu when she learned that her daughter had fallen seriously ill. When Carrie was flying in on the plane from London, Debbie had already made sure the table was set, Cameron said. The menu, everything. Fisher, who was 60, suffered the heart attack on that flight while traveling back to Los Angeles. The Star Wars actress died days later in the hospital, 1 day before her mother's death. There was no Christmas dinner. The table just sat there, Cameron told People magazine.
I mean, those are two people that you and I so grew up on, so treasured. Star Wars, Debbie Reynolds, the movies, the singing, the dancing. Quite a tragic story. Again, when two people, assuming Debbie was leaving a lot to Carrie, and that happens, what is, from the estate planning perspective, what is involved?
It's a really great question. So typically, let's say for the moment that we've got a situation where we've got a mother with some wealth, right? And she's written her estate plan, and it's totally for her daughter and son. She also had a son. And then the daughter predeceases. Technically, Carrie Fisher died before Debbie Reynolds died.
Right.
So some estate plans might even say, if this person doesn't survive me, the gift lapses. Right? Because the presumption is, oh, well, I'm leaving my funds to a living person who's then going to make decisions about it, who's then going to invest it, who's then going to make sure that something happens to it, maybe even for the next generation. And we know that Carrie Fisher has a daughter, Billie Lourd. And so what then happens? Well, there has to be some sorting out of things, right? So we've got Debbie Reynolds passes. Her things go to Carrie Fisher. Carrie Fisher passes and her things go to her daughter, Billie. But Carrie Fisher died first. So then what happens? So it depends on what the document says, which I'm not privy to their estate planning documents.
If there were no documents and there was a probate, is that a huge twist in it, where now the granddaughter is going to be left out?
Not necessarily. I mean, she is probably the ultimate beneficiary for both women in this case. And yet there has to be an orderly transfer of ownership, right? So title has to be updated into the new person's name. Does that new person have the authority to change those assets into her own name? She might be the trustee of her mom's trust, but not of her grandmother's trust. So there's going to be a lot of communication and a lot of stuff, but it's one of the what ifs that we have to consider. What if my children predecease me? What happens to my plan if none of the people I named in my plan can serve me? I mean, poor Debbie Reynolds only had a day to think about it, right? But what happens to Debbie if something happens to Carrie?
If Carrie and Debbie, and this is very common with mother-daughter, they have a joint a joint savings account, a joint checking account.
Sure.
And what?
Well, there's some other pitfalls about estate planning that I've seen where, for instance, mother and daughter in this case might have named each other as beneficiaries on savings accounts or other personally owned things. Let's make the distinction now between that which is owned by the trust. It's still Debbie Reynolds' property. Okay. So you go to the bank and I'm Debbie Reynolds.
Singing in the rain.
Who was an amazing human being. And I got to hear her speak at an American Society on Aging conference in Las Vegas. Her command of the stage, her sense of humor, her timing. I mean, what a person, what a human being. So Debbie goes to the bank and says, I'd like to open an account. And the banker is going to ask, how do you want this account titled? And Debbie can say, well, just put it under Debbie Reynolds and I'll deal with it later. That's not uncommon.
Very typical.
Okay. Debbie goes to her estate planning attorney. Her estate planning attorney says, you need to title your assets in the name of your trust. Otherwise, your trust doesn't operate on those assets. It's kind of like going to buy groceries and then making sure that they're put in the refrigerator. Otherwise, they go bad, right? So what we want a trust to be our refrigerator. And we want to take our assets. We want to make sure they're in the trust. But having a slip of paper with a list of assets that's in your estate planning binder is not putting it in the trust. What puts it in the trust is either naming the trust as the owner of the asset, and I'll give you an example in just a moment, or naming the trust as a beneficiary on the asset. Either way, whoever the trustee is will get to operate on those assets. So we're back to Debbie at the bank, and she says, oh, I'm going to put this in my trust. And we'll just make up a trust name, right? It's the Debbie Reynolds Family Trust. And the banker is going to say, oh, can I see a document that actually shows that you have the power to do this? And there she is as trustor, the creator of the trust. And she's listed as trustee. I've explained this before, but I'll say it again, right? Employer, employee, trustor, trustee, right? You get the idea. Somebody creates the business, creates the trust, and the other person actually does the work.
And that should be, if you have a trust, it should be that first page. It's an authorization page, or what do they call it?
Well, you might have a certification of trust.
Trust cert.
Right. So we refer to it as a trust cert, but it's a certification of trust. And the idea behind that is it summarizes who's in charge. It gives the name of the trust. It often gives the tax ID number of the trust. So the tax ID number would be Debbie Reynolds' Social Security number because nothing's changed. She's the one. It's hers, right? Now, once she dies, whoever becomes her trustee afterwards would have to get a new tax ID number for the trust. And the trust becomes irrevocable because the trustor, the person who created it, has passed away.
Carries a lot of responsibility. And again, I want to just make sure the audience understands the responsibility of getting a new tax ID number, and those little nuances to it take time, effort, and cost.
Well, sure. Like if you have a full-time job and you suddenly find yourself as your parent's trustee, you may have to do some balancing and figuring out when are you going to sort through all their paperwork? When are you going to work with the attorney so that you know that you're doing things properly? And you could be really smart and capable and well-educated and so on, but you're still going to have feelings. And you may not have done this before. And there are obligations. I mean, if you take on the fiduciary duty, you have 100% liability for everything that happens in that trust. And you have to account for everything.
As I say, with Debbie Reynolds and Carrie Fisher, there's probably a team of people. We have to assume that, but that's not everybody has a team of people around them.
No.
And so the brother, Todd, think of yourself, if you were in Todd's role, you just lost your mom and your sister within a very narrow period of time.
In less than a week.
Less than a week. The emotions of then going, I'm going to handle all of this, pretty overwhelming.
It really can be. And then keep in mind too, when someone dies, we have to arrange for funeral stuff. We have to deal with, cleaning out the refrigerator and dealing with certain things so they don't go bad. There's just a lot of immediate things that might come to mind while you're having really big feelings. So my hope is that everyone who watches our show is already kind of thinking about who's on my team. If I felt really sick, is there somebody I could call that would come get me and take me to the hospital? Because I don't want to go by myself. If I couldn't manage my household, is there someone I would trust who would let the maid in and make sure that everything was done properly and then pay the maid when the maid leaves so that when I come home from the hospital, the house is clean? It's like thinking about your own logistics and your own preferences is really what the estate planning process is all about. And I would like everyone to consider that you are sovereign. The way that you have made your life, the way that you have made your priorities, the things that you've chosen, the things you enjoy, all those things matter. And so when we think of estate planning, sometimes we think of it as a separate transactional black and white kind of thing, but that's not really so. It really should incorporate how you feel about your life and what's important to you.
It's your wishes, it's your wants.
Right.
And in this situation, if Debbie was assuming Carrie was going to be the one to manage her as she ages, was there a backup?
Right. So now let's talk a little bit about Billy. So Billy is Debbie Reynolds' granddaughter, Carrie Fisher's daughter. And I believe when this happened, so I have to do the math for a moment, I want to say that this is a very young person. I want to say that she might have been in her early 20s when she lost both of these important women in her life. And it ended up with a multi-million-dollar estate to handle and deal with. And I certainly hope that she had professionals that she could trust and people that she could trust, people that she felt close to and safe with, because that's the other part. Suddenly now you have $60 million, $80 million for which you're responsible. You have Carrie Fisher's likeness, Debbie Reynolds' likeness, the licensing for their name, their voice, their being, right? I mean, there's just so much to deal with. Intellectual property. Maybe both ladies were great about managing their financial affairs. Maybe they weren't. And so some kind of sorting has to take place. What is Debbie's? What is Carrie's? What is Debbie and Carrie's? Their houses were right next door to each other. They loved each other and tolerated each other and probably fought all the time. It's a real family, right?
Yeah.
And so I just remember one story that I heard about Carrie carrying soup to her mom's house next door because mom wasn't feeling good. And, just imagine that for a moment. People so close that they could walk right next door.
And we hear in our world that we've experienced over the last 20 plus years and doing what we've done for a living. Again, there's a lot of this situation where the mother-daughter are very close, but there may be an estranged son. I'm not saying, Todd, I'm not saying that. I'm just going to make, we're using this as an example where the son has, well, for whatever reason, is not really involved with the day-to-day life of a Debbie Reynolds or whoever the mother is. If I'm doing my estate plan, I have those situations. I've got two kids, one I'm really close with, one I'm really concerned about, but I want to do something for. What's the discussion I'm having with the attorney?
Okay, so I think what you're asking me is about equalizing. I think what you're asking me about is one child might not need any financial assistance and another does. Am I understanding
that,
your question?
or I am favoring one over the other, or I do not want to give outright gifts to one.
Okay, so for instance, maybe in a case where one child has had a couple of bad marriages, has a gambling issue, drug issue, whatever is going on for
This
that
is not
person.
Todd. We're just
Oh, no, no, no. We started with this family. I want to say that it's okay to hold funds in trust for one child, but not the other. Some kids get an outright distribution. That's the language behind that, right? That rather than hold funds and protect it behind the trust wall and make sure that creditors can't get to it, bankruptcy can't get to it, divorce can't get to it, you've got to hold those funds in trust. And somebody, not the kid, has to be the trustee. Okay? When you make a child a trustee of their own trust, there's no real protection there, right? Because they can help themselves to the funds whenever. And so creditors know that, lawyers know that. And so, but if you really are concerned about the kind of debt that your kid gets into, and you want to be sure that the funds that you're leaving behind are not subject to that kind of debt, you've got to put it behind the trust wall. That's one piece. The other child might be responsible, in your opinion, might have everything going great, might have a great marriage, right? And you give them their funds outright. However, you might still want to give them that protection. And so I've seen some trusts where the first 5 years after someone has passed away, all the funds are held in trust. And the trustee is given a lot of discretion to find out, is this person okay? Is everything really as okay as it seems? Because that way the trustee can be granted the power to either hold some or all the funds in trust, to make a partial outright distribution. Also, there are other standards in a trust that can be rules for the trustee: health, education, maintenance, and support.
That's a big term that we hear a lot.
Yeah, otherwise known as HEMS. And you'll see that on the show and you'll see it on the website. But the idea of health, education, maintenance, support is it gives me some parameters as the trustee of why I would make a distribution. So let's go back to Billie Lord for a moment, the granddaughter. Now she's responsible for all of that. Did she become the trustee? I don't know. But if I were her, I might say, no thanks. She might have an acting career. She might want to do some other things. She might want to just grieve for a while.
She's not saying no to the money. She's saying no to being the administrator or the trustee.
Right, to being the responsible party.
Right.
Let me give you an example. So Debbie and Carrie died in the month of December. Somebody has to get all of their tax documents together in order to file a tax return by the following April 15th. Just that.
I see an extension coming, but
Sure. But you still, you have to organize it, and you have to at least make an estimated payment.
Right.
You know, you can't get away with saying, oh, well, they died and I'm sad, I'm not going to do it. That, you know, there's one thing to know about the IRS. Okay. Think about the words, the IRS. Now take the space away. What does the word spell? Theirs. There you go. So, the idea is that you have to have somebody who's willing to step in and deal with the business of things. And then once Billie gets a chance to recover and so on, then maybe she gets to make some new decisions. But in the meantime, there's licensing issues, you know, other Star Wars products or stories might be published. There's, you know,
number 10 Star Wars movie. I mean, I don't know.
But you've got to protect intellectual property if you want to make money from it.
Correct.
And that kind of thing can unravel because there's no one actually watching the store. So there's just so much here in this one example to talk about.
And there's one other I really want you to tell the plan fans and the listeners that I've seen, you've seen, where the parents have set up a situation where the daughter is the successor trustee. They have held back distributions using the son, but they've made the daughter the decision maker as to what gets distributed to the son.
So let me see if I understand. I'm going to see if I can understand.
Put it in clear English.
Okay, so we've got a pair of parents.
Right.
They have two children.
Right.
The daughter's the eldest.
Correct.
The son is the youngest.
Okay.
I know there's just two of them.
Yep.
Okay. And they made the daughter the trustee,
Successor trustee.
right? And part of the daughter's responsibility is she's holding funds in trust for her brother.
Correct.
Does the daughter get to have access to her own funds? So did mom and dad do a 50-50 split?
Let's assume that.
Okay. So we've got a pair of parents. They did a 50-50 split with their two children, but they made one of those children the trustee of the trust for the other child.
Yes.
How's that relationship going to go?
Not well.
I could tell you that I would turn down being the trustee in that circumstance. I would turn it down. And the daughter, though she might feel an obligation and honor because her parents asked her to do this, honestly, she doesn't have to do it. There should be a successor. And I really hope that if you trust someone enough to be your trustee, that you also give them the power to replace themselves. Life is a surprising thing pretty often. And this daughter might have a husband who's ill. I mean, to also have to fight with her brother is a terrible thing to do. It's terrible. And the parents wanted to keep things in the family. The parents might have thought it'd be less expensive to have the daughter be the trustee, or she should be the trustee because she knows her brother so well. Maybe, but let's take a better look at that. Let's have the estate planning attorneys be strong and brave and actually walk the clients through of what that will actually look like 10 years after they've died. What will that look like? How will that feel for these two people?
Not something you recommend.
I wouldn't recommend it. One, because when anyone's holding the purse strings, it gives them different levels of power.
So let's give the audience an option. If they're going to their attorney tomorrow and that's their concern, they just don't want to give outright distribution to a child, what are their options? What are their alternatives?
Well, depending on their level of wealth and depending on their planning and how they hold their assets and so on, the attorney might say, well, if you're going to hold funds in trust for one of the children, let's get that child a professional fiduciary. Let's get a professional trustee in there, a neutral third party who's not related to anybody in this case, who has systems in place, who knows how to deal with it. Is it because the son might have drug problems, gambling problems, he doesn't take care of himself, whatever's going on for him? That way, the professional can also be granted authority to look at his resources. If he's working, then the trust might last longer. If he's never worked, that's a different picture, and maybe there's public benefits possible for him. So it is possible to create a trust that is just for that individual and to say, we're going to put this money into it, but it should really be run by somebody who understands how all of this works. Daughter can receive her funds outright. Son needs to have his funds held in trust with a professional.
Is that something you've had to work with over
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And the son's calling you for?
Well, I'm very fortunate that I've had a lot of really great beneficiaries to work with. Occasionally, there's someone who's really angry. They're really angry that they weren't given the funds outright. They were looking forward to it. They had plans for these funds. Their plans for the funds are probably why their parents put it in trust, right? I'm sorry, a jet ski is not an investment. So, well, the thing is that all of us have ideas about how things should go, but this is the parents' money. It's not the child's money.
It's the parents' money. Please,
it's the parents'
it's
money.
your money.
Right.
You've earned it.
And you can decide to a degree how it goes for your beneficiaries. But here's the thing. You got to respect your beneficiaries. You got to do it with kindness in mind, and that would enhance their life. It's no fair to create a prison for them. That's not fair. Instead, you have to make a reasonable way for them to access the funds. Let me give you an example. The health, education, maintenance, and support standard that we see in a lot of documents. Health, education, maintenance, and support. If someone tells me, oh, well, you're the trustee for my parents' money and I need a new roof, I'm going to say, great, get 2 bids, send me the bids, and I'll select the contractor and work with them directly, and I'll pay for it. I'll work directly with the contractor, and we'll keep you in the loop in terms of scheduling. I've had a beneficiary turn around and say, well, no, I just want you to give me the money for it. I go, okay, I can't do that because the way this is set up for health education, maintenance, and support is I actually need documentation. Okay. Part of the way the trust works is that I'm going to be very careful with the resources. I'm going to invest these funds and have them working. So if I have to take something out of an investment to pay for a new roof, I can do that.
Gotcha.
But I'm not going to do it unless, one, it's warranted and it's needed. We're working with a licensed and insured contractor. But notice that I gave the beneficiary a lot of control to start with 2 contractors of their choosing. And if that doesn't work out, I might get a couple of bids and we might need to negotiate and talk about who's going to be hired to do this job.
I just pointed out that you're operating it which it should be, as a business to respect the person you're doing business with, versus what's going to happen if it's sibling rivalry. It's all emotions and usually just falls apart.
Right. So now we look at the sister having to deal with a request from her brother. And he calls up and he says, I know you'll never give this to me. I know you're just going to give me a hard time and everything, but I need this money. And she's going to say, oh, well, I knew this day would come and I'm just going to have to say no. And now it's not business. It's not a transaction. Nobody's documenting anything. It's just a fight.
Now, you didn't let me have the shotgun when we were small.
Probably for good reason, Ron.
Not the shotgun in the car. Let me clarify. Let me clarify that. You didn't let me ride shotgun next to mom in the car. So we clarify what I was
right.
So, not the gun, not the pistol.
So fighting over the front seat does happen for a lot of families, right? But there's also that feeling that I never got to have first dibs. I never got to have new clothes. I've talked with somebody who's in their 80s. And their chief complaint about the family they grew up in is that they never had new clothes. There was always hand-me-downs. And when they finally moved out, like at 17, ran away from home and never looked back, it was really to have some independence and really to feel cared for by people that are not related. Then years and years later, he got an inheritance. He got a check for $10. $10. Yeah. And it really pissed him off. But he wasn't in touch with them and he wasn't close, right? You should not use your trust as a way to have your children stay close to you. We should not be dangling this carrot and say, you have to call me every Sunday or I'm going to write you out of the will. I mean, it's terrible. It's terrible. And I know people do it. It's terrible. Independent Trustee Alliance is a proud nonprofit sponsor of Plan for This. If you are considering serving as a trustee, please visit trusteealliance.com to learn more about this complex and sometimes overwhelming job. trusteealliance.com. Plan for This thanks the Estate Sale Warehouse for all their amazing service and support. Entire home cleanouts, inventory, appraisal, auctions, sale of fine art and classic cars. Learn more at estatesalewarehouse.com.
Well, we do thank Carrie and Debbie for their incredible body of work during their lifetimes. If you want to do something you haven't done in a long time, Gene Kelly, Debbie Reynolds, Singing in the Rain,
Donald O'Connor, you cannot if you need something just to have a smile on your face for a couple hours, the good old days of the 40s, I assume it was the 40s movies. Carrie Fisher, obviously an icon, Star Wars, and so much more. So this is a great story to help educate our listening audience. Please subscribe. Please write in your comments to us, and we will try to get them on the air at some point in time. We won't divulge names. But. And Billy Lord has my heart. I know this has not been an easy thing. It was a few years ago that this happened. Billy, you have a lot on your shoulders. There's just so much to think about and to do. And I hope you have all of the necessary help and love. But now it's time for you to have your own estate plan. Billy Lord, will you be ready when life asks, did you plan for this?
Money management.